Hello, my name is Miss Sarah Parker. I'm a 7th grade English teacher. I'm also taking courses through ECU with intermediate readers. Today I'll be working through some comprehension strategies using a more advanced text entitled The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell. This is a text that I use within my own 7th grade classroom, but I will be applying 5th grade comprehension strategies, which we also continue to use throughout 7th grade. Some strategies that you'll see for comprehension will be monitoring comprehension. I'll be making notes and speaking throughout the text. Activating and connecting background knowledge, specifically through text-to-text, text-to-self, text-to-world connections. Continuous questioning throughout the text as I read. Visualizing and inferring. I'll specifically be using the model where we take an idea or prior knowledge, add it with evidence or what we see in the text, and that creates an inference. Determining importance, asking deeper questions using multiple skills to break down sections of the text for better understanding. And lastly, summarizing information. This is also connected to synthesizing, but I left it with just summarizing because that's more of what you will see in the presentation in the notes. So the first thing that we do, step one, would be using our prior knowledge with the title. This is something similar for 7th grade that maybe you would do during the K section of a KWL. But for my intermediate courses, then we break down and ask the question, what is the most important word or words in our title? So we would pull out the word dangerous, knowing that there will be some sort of danger, and also the word game. Some sort of game played. We're not quite what type of game, but we know that it is dangerous. And if you'd like to continue supporting that, then the word most, we have to think of not just a little bit dangerous, but the most dangerous. So our words, again, are dangerous and game. So now we can make a few connections with these, trying to pull out some of that prior knowledge. Text-to-text connections with the word game and also something dangerous would be the book Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is a game and it's also dangerous. But we can also pull out our own prior knowledge with what sort of games we encounter in our daily lives that are dangerous. Things like football, basketball, baseball, soccer, these all have injuries that come from them, so they can be dangerous. I've also had students bring up things that are more of like a psychological danger. I've had students talk about Ouija boards and different types of games that they've experienced in their own lives. Step 3 is to use the picture to make observations. With the most dangerous games, then we are given a picture to accompany the text. So the very first step is to make very basic observations. I see leaves, an eyeball, a scope. Now my students have a lot of prior knowledge with hunting, so this would be very simple for them to pull out a scope. If your students do not have prior knowledge about hunting, then that would be something that maybe they would not quite understand at first. And then I follow this up with my second observations. I want to get even more detailed about this. Pull the first observations into play, but go even deeper. So not only are they just leaves, but across the back of the image we see fern leaves. In front of that, in the bottom right hand corner, we see some wavy leaves. If students are familiar, they might say like banana leaves or just a larger fern type of leaves. We see a human eye, not just an eye, but this is specifically a human eye. And we know that because there's wrinkles that are around this eye. And also above the eye, we see some sort of straight shadow. We can't quite tell what it is yet, so we'll have to use our next step to figure out what it is. So speaking of, the step 4 is to use your second, more detailed observations to ask questions. So again, here's our image. I'm going to pull up the second observation questions that we made just to refer back to. And here are some questions that we can come up with based off of our second observations. Why is this leaf wavy? Where do we see these types of leaves? So it's obviously not some sort of house plant or something that these look like they're out in the wild. So where do we see these types of leaves? And then also, this is again with some prior knowledge of hunting, but is the scope looking back at the hunter or out at the target? And a lot of times what's helpful is to actually ball up your hand with just a little space to see through and put it over your eye, and have the students to do this as well. And think about using your other finger to point back toward your own face, so you're looking back at the hunter, or pointing out in a direction, and that will be out at the target. This is a little bit more of a difficult concept to put into words, but it's very helpful for our thought process. And then what do the wrinkles tell us about the person that the eye belongs to? So once we create these questions, then we're going to use the questions and the observations and add those to our prior knowledge. So the questions, observations, those would be our would be our evidence. And our prior knowledge would be our idea, and those would make the inferences. Again, here's our image since we're still working through this. And here are our questions that we just created. Oops. So here's some inferences that we can create from the idea. Possibly, the leaf is wavy because of humidity. The way that we can create this inference is that you can make some sort of a text-to-world or text-to-self connection about leaves in a drier area, perhaps where you live or your students live, will be straighter, they'll be stiffer, perhaps they dry out easily. And waves come from water, so the water makes them wavy. And these wavy leaves and ferns are seen in the rainforest or Amazon. This could be a connection back to science, prior knowledge to science, some sort of TV show that they've seen or a movie that they've seen, a book, another book that they've read, text-to-text connection. And then another inference we can make is each student should choose their own inference about the scope. So what I chose as the teacher, which the students may choose something different, and that doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means that they might choose something different. But what I chose is that the scope is looking back at the hunter, which leads me to believe that the hunter, excuse me for the typo, the hunter is older and has some sort of safari hat on. So that also pulls in our shadow observation that we made and our question that we had about it. So possibly he's experienced. Someone that's older might be a little bit more experienced. If he has a safari hat, he has his own clothing and materials that goes with the hunting, then perhaps this shows that he's done it before. He knows how to use the scope. He's familiar with a gun or a type of weapon that's used in hunting. So once we have used our picture, then I always encourage students to make a prediction. They have the title, they have any type of questions that we have created about the title, they have the, or observations, they have the picture or image, and both the observations, the questions, and the inferences. So now it's time to make a prediction before we even start reading. So what my prediction was, and again, this is based off of the scope observation that I made, and I remind students that predictions are your own opinion. They can change and be different amongst readers. So my prediction is that I predict the story takes place on some sort of island or land in a rainforest. I think that there will be some sort of hunter that is a very good hunter because he has been practicing for a long time. Again, that comes with the age and with the materials that he has. He will use some sort of gun for his hunting. This comes from the scope. All right, so now we actually dive into the text. We begin reading. The very first line says, quote, "Off there to the right, somewhere, is a large island, said Whitney. It's rather a mystery. So I pull out large island because this gives us our setting. It confirms my prediction about some sort of like rainforest or island, but it's very important, especially at the 7th grade level, and not as much detail with the 5th grade intermediate level, but establishing our setting. Then I pull out Whitney because this introduces a character, and just from prior knowledge and from our own experiences, then maybe we connect Whitney to a woman. And lastly, this part of a mystery. So I'm going to question, why is it a mystery? Who says it's a mystery? And then also make an observation that this makes me nervous and curious as the reader. So notice that I'm making observations and questioning the text the whole time that I'm reading. I'm always thinking as I read. And then just as a little key, this will continue as we go along. The blue words are observations, the purple words are questions. So here's our first line. Let's keep moving on with the reading. What island is it? Ransford asked. Well, the thing that stands out to me the most is that we have another character that's introduced. But Rainsford, that's not a common first name. So this must mean that the characters, both Whitney and Ransford, are being addressed by their last names. This can make both characters men. So again, we connected Whitney to possibly being a female name, and now we're saying, well, Whitney could be a last name, especially because Rainsford, that's not a very common first name. So we know that that's definitely a last name there. So I'm going to read this first and then go back and break it down. The old charts call it Ship Trap Island, Whitney replied. A suggestive name, isn't it? Sailors have a curious dread of the place. I don't know why, some superstition. Can't see it, remarked Rainsford, trying to peer through the dank tropical night that was palpable as it pressed its thick, warm blackness in upon the yacht. You've good eyes, said Whitney with a laugh. And I've seen you pick off a moose moving in the brown fall bush at 400 yards. But even you can't see 4 miles or so through a moonless Caribbean night. Nor 4 yards, admitted Rainsford. Ugh, it's like moist black velvet. So going back, sailors have a curious dread of the place. So now we know this answers our earlier question, who calls it a mystery or mysterious? Sailors do. So I can make an inference of what I know about sailors, and this makes me think it must be mysterious because sailors are comfortable and familiar with random islands. I'm using my prior knowledge about sailors, that they're always on the water, that they seem to be somewhat fearless in a way, that maybe this type of superstition does play into it, but they usually have some sort of reason. A lot of times in movies, then sailors are the ones that know, not to go there. Don't go there. Don't even try. Or, that's a safe place to go. We can stay here for the night. All right, words like dank, palpable, yacht. While I'm reading, I'm noticing that these are words that I don't know. So I'm using context clues, but at a 7th grade level, but I'm also inferring from the text that they are describing how dark it is on the ocean at night. So they're descriptive words. And then on top of that, I know this because a yacht is a boat. So that comes from some prior knowledge. Caribbean night. Again, this is more support for our setting. And then here's my summary. So I like to stop here because this is right above a transition moment in the story. So for my summary, 2 men are sailing on a boat. It is dark and they are passing, excuse me for the typo, an island called Ship Trap Island. Then the men joke about Ransford's poor/bad hunting skills. Now, the way that I pulled this is because Whitney says that he's seen him pick off a moose, but he says it with a laugh. So I can guess that he's saying, maybe he's done this in the past, but right now his eyes aren't that good. And Ransford it says he admitted, so he's not just saying it. He's not just being mad about it, but he's admitting it. He's going along with this joke that he can't see 4 yards in this darkness. So we have to pull some prior knowledge and make some inferences to create this summary. This next part. It will be light enough in Rio, promised Whitney. We should make it in a few days. I hope the Jaguar guns have come from Purdy's. We should have some good hunting up the Amazon. Great sport, hunting. The best sport in the world, agreed Rainsford. For the hunter, amended Whitney, not for the jaguar. Don't talk rot, Whitney, said Rainsford. You're a big game hunter, not a philosopher. Who cares how a jaguar feels? Perhaps the jaguar does, observed Whitney. So here we have Rio. And Rio, that's going to be a big moment for me where I pull in some prior knowledge. Rio is in Brazil. It's short for Rio de Janeiro. And so my students know from their prior knowledge, from what I've talked about my own experience, that I used to teach a few hours from there. So I've talked about Rio in class before. That's why we have some prior knowledge. I've also shown them some pictures, talked about my older students. Then we have the text-to-text connection. So I've seen the movie Rio, which is the same place. And many of my students have seen this. We watched it as a reward one day in my class. But also, that's a pretty popular animated children's movie. So Rio, they can envision the setting of trees, mountains, water, lots of people. They connect it back to the Amazon that much more. So I put text to text because it's somewhat a text. It's a movie, but it also could follow text to world. So the Amazon, it's a positive connection. So now we are absolutely sure that the Amazon is the setting. All right, Jaguar guns. And the great sport hunting. So now we know what they're doing. Now we know why they're on the boat. That they are going to hunt jaguars for fun or for sport, for what they call it. So I have a text to self connection because once again I said that I've talked about this in class before, but Miss Parker, showed us a picture of her getting her forehead licked by a jaguar in a cage. I know that they look like spotted big cats. So I showed them this picture earlier in the year and have shown it a few times. And so jaguars, they're familiar with how big they are. But I also continue with my own connection that jaguars are about as tall as our desks that are in our classroom. At least the top of their head is. That they're pretty long. They're going to be at least my wingspan, and I'd say I'm somewhat short, but I have about a 5-foot wingspan. We know that they're agile, that they can run a lot and very quickly, and they can change directions very quickly. So we know that is a really intense sport. And then this large piece. So I'll go ahead and reread this. The best sport in the world, agreed Rainsford. For the hunter, amended Whitney, not for the jaguar. Don't talk rot, Whitney, said Rainsford. You're a big game hunter, not a philosopher. Who cares how a jaguar feels? Perhaps the jaguar does, observed Whitney. So this is where we're going to pull in some sort of, we know this is an important section in the text because it's the first time that they've sort of changed the subject from the island and what they're doing, and they really start to go deeper into the text. So first we need to question ourselves, why would the author include this detail? I always remind my students that Whenever an author creates a text and writes something, that they don't put things in there by accident. Every single word, and especially a quote that they put in there, is very important. So we know that it must be an important conversation. So what's important about it? They talk about hunting jaguars. So we're just going back and we're breaking down, pretty much summarizing the text again, that small section. They talk about hunting jaguars, that they both enjoy it. They're both hunters. But it seems like they're thinking of two different things when they talk about hunting. So how is this? How are they thinking about two different things? Rainsford enjoys being the hunter. And Whitney speaks of the perspective of the jaguar. So he's not saying that he doesn't enjoy it, but he's saying, this last line, perhaps the jaguar does. Perhaps the jaguar cares about it and thinks that it's not such a great sport. So the thing that gets hunted, we're thinking about the perspective of the jaguar, the thing that's getting hunted. So then we can create an inference and almost like an updated prediction that Whitney is going to have something happen to him so that he needs to understand how a jaguar feels while being hunted. So we've pulled in a game, that there's some sort of game, and because it's a dangerous game, then we can think back to the title, link back to the title here, and think about two different words for game. So game could be like something that's played, but game could also be a type of animal. And we know that they have a big game hunter. So here I'm thinking back to, well, what do they mean by a game? Is it something that's dangerous that's being played, or is it something that's dangerous that's an animal? And we know that they're talking about jaguars here, but wouldn't they just say in the title, the most dangerous jaguar? So maybe they're talking about something else. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to go back and check that. So I'm sort of making a prediction and an inference at the same time. For the last piece, then we want to make sure that we have tied everything together. We've noted how important this page is. We've talked about how we've confirmed our setting. We've talked about the characters that are involved. We've used this image, this picture at the beginning of the text, and we are connecting it into our own text, while also making connections outside of the text to ourselves, to the world, to text, or in our case, to a movie as well. And we are constantly questioning, why would they do that? Why do they feel that way? Why would they mention that? Why would they say that? And from that, we can pull inferences. So I hope that this has been helpful for both intermediate text and also at the 7th grade and possibly more advanced levels, since the most dangerous game is commonly used in about an 8th grade level.